Curundu. The Curundu Military Reservation was established in December 30th, 1919. And originally it encompassed what became Fort Clayton, the Panama Ordnance Depot, the Engineer Depot, the post of Corozal, Corozal Camp, and Albrook Field. And as time went on, pieces were broken off. Albrook Field was separated from Curundu and established as a separate place in 1924. Fort Clayton split off in 1920. Camp Corozal, a subpost of Curundu, was located near the Panama Canal Company town of Pedro Miguel. And reportedly, the Tropical Test Center, TTC, conducted most of its testing of toxic materials on Curundu. This being the location of their laboratory and so forth, and their headquarters. Most of Curundu was turned over to the Republic of Panama in 1982. First location is the location that used to be the Tropical Test Center Curundu Field Chemical Laboratory, and also pretty much their headquarters in the Canal Zone. And this is now being reused, and according to the Google Earth here, it's now the Metropolitan Natural Park Visitor Center. I located this based on the Tropical Test Center maps. And if we take a look at our attachments, our low resolution 1969 view, we're talking right here. And on our Canal Zone map fragment, we're talking over in here. On the Tropical Test Center map, it's number 3 right here. Number 3, Field Chemical Laboratory, Curundu. We have another Tropical Test Center location on Curundu, and this was they called this the TTC Database Project Site Jungle. And if we back out, it's still very much jungle in this area. I located it based on the Tropical Test Center map. If we look at attachments on our low resolution 1969 view, we're right in here. And we're actually a little off this Canal Zone map fragment. And on the Tropical Test Center map, it's number 4. Number 4, Database Project Site Jungle. Next, we'll go to Corozal. And Corozal was ended up being a sub-installation of Fort Clayton. And toward the end of the canal construction, the Canal Commission abandoned most of the Corozal settlement and turned over the use of the buildings to the Army. Corozal was divided by Galliard Highway, and it was referred to as West Corozal and East Corozal. And West Corozal was included like the Directorate of Engineering and Housing, the largest part of East Corozal was the American Cemetery. And in 1996, Lockheed-Martin had a contract to receive and remove hazardous material from military installations in the Canal Zone. They worked in warehouses located in West Corozal, and reportedly the workers were warned to be wary of a number of items coming in, including 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. And Corozal was turned over to the Republic of Panama in 1999. Now, the location I have pinned actually is one of the housing areas. I don't have enough information on the warehouses that were used or may have been used by Lockheed-Martin. So I did find through one of the studies that was done in Panama in the 1976, it was called Pesticide Monitoring, and it was a special study 44-0102. And it had to do with sampling in the Canal Zone. So I picked this housing area because Corozal was one of the two areas that the study focused on, the other being Fort Davis. And these are now private residences. Moving on to Fort Clayton. Fort Clayton, the first units moved into Fort Clayton in 1920. As I mentioned earlier, it was the land originally was part of Curundu military reservation. In the later days of Fort Clayton, the major units included the Southern Command Network and 193rd Infantry Brigade, who were both headquartered there. And also the United States Army South was headquartered there. The base had a significant number of base housing and barracks located on it. And reportedly, the U.S. began shipment of Agent Orange to the Canal Zone in the late 1960s, and they initially stored it on Fort Clayton. There's also mention of chemical munitions being stored on Fort Clayton at one time. Fort Clayton was turned over to the Republic of Panama on July 30th, 1999. I have two areas pinned in Fort Clayton. This one is an enlisted housing area that backs up to jungle and so forth. And the reporter was Bonnie Schmidt. And Bonnie made remarks saying they sprayed the backyards of the housing routinely to deter jungle encroachment. Any housing area on Fort Clayton, groundskeepers would come by monthly and spray along the backyards that backed up to any jungle forestation. And it was always a 4 to 6 swath of dead vegetation along the backyards. These residents, including all other residents on Fort Clayton, are now private residences. And if I look here on attachments, our 1969 low resolution view gives us really even less here because of clouds, but the area we're talking about is right here. On a map fragment from the Canal Zone, we're talking this housing area right in here. Our next spot on Fort Clayton is the officer housing area. And this was reported by Winter Chauvin. And Winter had the same concerns as the enlisted housing that we looked at. In fact, our pin is right up from the last place we looked. And the concern being that the backyards of the quarters that backed up to the jungle were frequently treated and sprayed to keep the jungle vegetation back from the quarters. If we look at our attachments, we're right over here, right by the cloud, on our 1969 low resolution view. On our map, we're now looking at this area here by these quarters. And this is a photograph taken by Edwin Armbruster in the late 60s, early 70s. And we're talking about this housing area over in this area. And this is an old photograph that shows officer quarters. And you can see the vegetation and jungle in the background here. The date this photo was taken is unknown. It was taken by Graves and Klein Architects. 1960s, early 70s, we're talking right over in here. Albrook Air Force Base. And once again, this land at one time was part of a field that was broken away from the military reservation in 1920. And Albrook Field became operational in 1932 as an Army Air Corps field. And it was built over an area that had been used since the 20s as a grass emergency landing field. In 1948, it was transferred to the Air Force. And Albrook Field was turned over to the Republic of Panama on the 30th of September, 1997. And starting in January of 1999, the airfield started civilian air service and as an international airport. And there have been a number of shops, markets, malls, and government agencies such as the Panamanian Red Cross that have now operate out of old buildings and hangars located on Albrook Field. And most of the officers' quarters are now private homes. Most of the area has been built on. We have an area down near the actual landing strip. This was reported again by Bonnie Schmidt. And Bonnie said, that they sprayed out in this area near the old 210th Aviation area. And it went from green to brown in a matter of days after being sprayed. Now, I had to kind of pick around to pin an area, and I don't know if access will be possible, as this is an operating airport. The terminal's back here, the runway is here. This all used to be open, which I'll show you in a few minutes here. In fact, let's take a look at the attachments. Even on our 1969 low resolution view, you can see here's the pin, and you can see, the hangars are back there, but there was an open area between it and the runway. And on our CZ map fragment, we're talking over in this area here. Okay, this is the best way that you can see. This is another photo taken by Edwin Armbruster, and it was in the late 60s and 70s. And as you can see, the old hangars are over here, and you had quite a bit of space before you got out to the runway. And refresh. Okay, this is again another photo by Edwin Armbruster, and we're talking over in this area, and it was all open. But as you can see in the current photos, that's no longer true. Another point on Albrook, and this was reported by Terrence S. Poole, and he really didn't have much to say about it other than, he said alongside the roadways and on Albrook, he had a feeling had been sprayed. I picked this area, which is, we were down here earlier looking at the area down by the runway. If you come off the runway to that would be to the east. I've pinned this area here, which is before you go off of Albrook. And if we look at our low resolution view from 1969, I've pinned in this area right in here. And on our Canal Zone map fragment, that is right in here. And going back to the photo I showed earlier, taken by Edwin Armbruster of in the late 60s, early 70s, we're talking back in here.
I'd like to thank veteran Richard Wyman for putting together all of this information on possible places to test in the Panama Canal Zone. I'd like you to all come over to the Military Veterans Advocacy and join with us today. We are further than we have ever been before. We have a rulemaking request that's been granted by the VA Secretary. We have an HR 5026 bill for Panama introduced into the Congress, and we could not have done that without the Military Veterans Advocacy and the leadership of Commander John Wells. There's also a ton of information under the Veterans of Panama Canal that we have submitted to the VA Secretary who granted our request. So this information might be able to help you in your claims. And if you need help with an attorney, if you're at the appeals level, use our contact button and contact our administrative staff, and they can guide you for help.